Thank you for joining us and welcome to E3 Alliance's Road to Recovery webinar, a priority playbook for your school. Before getting started, I wanted to let you know that we will be providing the slides, recording, and roadmap to all participants in the webinar follow-up. We have also put a link to these resources in the chat. Scroll down on that page and you will see the hyperlinks to these resources. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature and we will answer a few towards the end. Also, engage with our social media platforms. Tweet or post by tagging @E3 Alliance. Sharing the priority playbook today will be myself, Matt Pope, and my two amazing colleagues, Terry Clement and Amy Havard. Our team has extensive experience in leading schools, and we currently support school leaders all over the state of Texas. We're excited to guide you through this work today. We are part of the team at E3 Alliance, a nonprofit based in Austin, Texas, whose mission is to transform education systems through data and collaboration so all students succeed. All students is very important to us, and based on the current social unrest, we are working even harder by sharing data and collaborating with our partners to ensure we eliminate systemic racism and institutional inequities in our schools and community. So who is participating in our webinar today? Many of you are campus and district leaders. The biggest group is coming from Texas, with many states represented. We also have participants from Egypt and St. Lucia. Welcome to all of you and thank you for joining. Today, we will share the priority playbook and dive into each category with what you must do to move in the direction of recovery and transformation. We will also provide you with a roadmap to plan out this work for your team. We know COVID-19 has impacted all parts of our lives, but more specifically, it has challenged everything we think about schooling and learning. We know you have been hearing lots of what you should be doing, but we want to help you by showing you how to actually start to move towards recovery and, more importantly, transformation. This playbook will serve as a guide to ensure the focus is on what is most important. Please review the chart on the screen. We were in the crisis stage with emergency remote learning starting in March until the end of the school year. We are now on the way to recovery, and what we are about to experience is re-entry, which is in the transition phase. Let me be clear, August will not be recovery. It will be re-entry. I like to think we are in the first inning of a really long baseball game. As we move towards recovery and transformation, stay committed to doing things differently because we have an incredible opportunity to rethink our schools as we transform into a new normal. So let's learn about the priority playbook. This playbook can support you wherever you are at in the journey towards transformation. The pathway is the priority. So what is up first? Leading forward. Focus on leading the transformation, which runs through all parts of this playbook. Next, we must create a safe place where our students, staff, and families are healthy and secure. Once we have determined safety for all, we must send a message that we are in this together by ensuring students and staff are attending and engaging. When we have them attending, we then focus on reigniting our school culture to create a place where everyone belongs. And finally, we close the gaps for all learners by providing equitable, high-quality instruction. We are going to give you more detail about each of these examples throughout our webinar today. But I just want to reinforce, you must start with strong leadership and continue that leadership to build a safe place, get people there, make them whole again, and grow them academically. That is the priority. Before we dig into the first playbook category, I wanted to let you know how this content is structured. For each of these sections, there will be 2 slides from the actual priority playbook that will be available to you. Following the playbook slides, we will show you a few examples of what this can look like in a school. So let's take a deep dive into our first playbook category, leading forward. Why is leadership its own category on our playbook? Leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. We are dynamically developing a vision for the 2021 school year each day as we get new news. That's going to happen. Change will happen. But leading forward through these changes is the part we must get right. Today, I'm not just going to tell you how to be a great leader. I'm going to tell you how to be a great leader of this work. I'm going to give you some guiding principles, concrete examples, and a way to map out your own road. So exactly, how do we lead forward with this work? It begins with engaging a diverse and representative leadership team and recognizing that what was important before is still very important. So as you can see at the top right, there is a symbol. This symbol indicates that these slides are from the priority playbook for leading forward. Each section will have a symbol connected to the playbook. So let's start talking about leading forward. Your diverse representative leadership team should collaborate frequently to utilize all input, feedback, and learning to make decisions. A decision-making guide will be critical to your team's success. This guide should include filters focused on your school's mission, goals, and stakeholder groups. The leadership team should also be the group that gives real feedback on how things are going in your school community, including culture and the systems being implemented. By checking the pulse through this ongoing communication and collaboration, we will know how decisions are impacting all groups in our school community as we move in this transition to re-entry. As a leader, I would add a pulse check to all agendas for this leadership team that should collaborate frequently. It is also critical that we recognize and plan to continue improvement efforts that were happening in your school pre-COVID. We might have had a disruption to those, or they might have gotten worse because of the crisis, but it does not mean that those challenges or problems have gone away. Your leadership team should be using your decision-making guide as a filter to review your school's mission and goals and improvement plans to align them to new efforts and re-entry. The last guidance to lead the transformation focuses on the importance of communication. Communication will determine the difference between effective and ineffective systems. As leaders, you must keep all stakeholders up to date by communicating explicitly, frequently, and in a transparent manner. Your team should develop and utilize a communication plan that has multiple pathways and modes for communication and flow by also ensuring all communication is accessible. Schools did an incredible outreach and communication in the crisis stage over the last few months. Take those strategies and lessons learned and integrate them into your communication plan. So let's take a look at a few examples for this category of the playbook. Take a second to look at this example of a diverse representative leadership team. The work of a school leader cannot rest on one or two sets of shoulders. Shared leadership is key to thoughtful planning and effective implementation of any efforts. That is why it's important to build a team that represents the diversity of your school community to address the challenges we are facing and will face. As you see from the example, there are members that are part of this new leadership team that might not have been there traditionally, but we are no longer operating in that world. Some areas of decision making are better for smaller groups or task force within the leadership team. From this example, a team that includes an administrator, counselor, teacher leader, head custodian, school nurse, and student reps might serve on a safety task force to plan the movement patterns and give input on schedules. Let's take a look at this example of a communication plan. Utilizing a communication plan allows for multiple pathways and modes for the communication to flow. This is something I see very often missed in schools. To get our schools to recover and transform, a communication plan must exist. Creating a plan will ensure the leadership team knows the roles they play in different types of communication, allow you to analyze your current communication for blind spots, and plan out the communication work that is needed to prepare and distribute information. Building your communication plan should be one of the first tasks of your leadership team and should be a standing item at your meetings. Now I'm going to hand it over to Amy for the next category in our priority playbook.
Thanks, Matt. A few months ago, when we realized we wouldn't be seeing our students in our buildings, the first actions we took as school leaders went right to the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Were they physically okay? Did they have shelter, food? Why did we go there? Because it felt like the right thing to do. It still is. As we prepare to welcome students back to school, the right place to start is ensuring our school is a safe place, a healthy, secure environment for everyone. In order to create a healthy, secure environment, we must consider all stakeholder needs. Schools should be frequently gathering input from students, staff, families, district leaders, and community members to determine options for next year and adjustments throughout the year. But gathering input is not enough. We must also evaluate the impact our decisions have by continually considering the input and needs of each stakeholder. After gathering input and evaluating decisions for each stakeholder, we need to devise a clear plan for physical safety. This plan includes movement patterns and a schedule to minimize contact in common areas, such as the front office, hallways during passing periods, and more. The plan must include our visitor procedures as well. Will we allow visitors or not? Do we do curbside call-in for pickup and drop-off? As we approach the beginning of the year, it will be critical to plan for back-to-school events that are important to families, such as registration and Meet the Teacher. Consider staggered attendance times, careful movement patterns, or doing them virtually to keep them as safe as possible. The final part of planning for a safe place is designing variations in scheduling that meet the physical safety needs of all stakeholders, while also considering how to close academic gaps, meet nutritional needs, ensure childcare as families go back to work, and eliminate access gaps for virtual learning. Here's an example of a survey from a school. To consider all stakeholder needs by gathering input, this example school, Johnson Academy, created a survey plan that began at the end of May and continues throughout the summer every 2 weeks. Their plan is critical because they're collecting input from families and staff frequently to drive decision-making to make sure all stakeholders have voice and choice in their experience next year and feel safe returning. It helps the school administrators prepare schedules to support both students and staff. You'll notice this school has a plan to ensure 100% participation by providing multiple pathways to receive input and ensure language is accessible to all. Now, in order to devise a clear plan based off of stakeholder input, campus leaders must design variations in scheduling for differentiated and equitable supports for students. Next, I'm going to show you some examples. 1 student schedule and 2 teacher schedules for a few different scenarios. We know there are still a variety of different scenarios out there, so our examples won't showcase them all. We just hope that this helps you see the creative things you can do based off of input from your stakeholders and the resources you have available. This is the time to be creative to meet the needs of everyone in your school community. We have more options now than ever before to get things right for our students and staff. Take a look at this example. This example shows a student who's going to school for 50% of the school day. The student will receive an in-person instruction in the morning from 8 to 11 a.m. They will depart on the bus with their school lunch to eat at home. Students and teachers will have lunch and transition time in the middle of the day. Then in the PM, there's virtual learning on different subjects, enrichment, and also time for students to participate in class, small group, or individual check-ins with their teacher. Now, here's a different example. This is an example of a different scenario for a teacher that is leading learning in a 50-50 experience. The AM is in person for 3 periods of their classes. The in-person time is used for connections, social emotional learning, and instruction to get the students accelerated to prepare for their virtual blocks in the afternoon. Students depart at 11 a.m. and teachers have planning and lunch in the middle of the day. Their afternoon is virtual teaching to the other periods of their day to provide enrichment, support, and check-ins while students are working on their independent pathways of learning. What you don't see in this example schedule is that there are staggered releases of grade levels to limit the number of students in the hallway during transitions in the morning. This could also be flipped for different grade levels, where some students attend virtually in the morning and then come to school for in-person teaching in the afternoon. Now take a look at our last example. This last example is for a teacher who is teaching 100% virtually. This could be due to school buildings being closed again, a staff member who is medically fragile and cannot attend in person, and or a school with many families preferring their students attend virtual only. This schedule is for an elementary teacher, and the morning time is spent on math and ELA only, with a break for the teacher and students included. The afternoon allows for rotating science and social studies lessons while also providing time for the teacher to do small group or individualized check-ins. Monday through Thursday end with class meetings and check-ins. Friday allows for enrichment and end-of-week check-ins and celebrations. We've looked at some examples of both communication and variations in scheduling. Now it's time to look at the next priority on our playbook. In addition to providing a safe place, we'll need to send a message of encouragement for all stakeholders to attend and participate in our learning community. Supporting staff and student attendance will be more important this year than ever before. Attendance issues from previous years, such as chronic absences and lack of subs, will still be present and will most likely be exacerbated by health concerns and non-traditional school environments, such as virtual learning or alternating schedules. So why does attendance matter so much? Well, besides the obvious, we know that if teachers aren't teaching and students aren't participating, the learning doesn't happen. Learning is the purpose of school, and even through recent months have required us to drastically shift our thinking around attendance and participation. There's no denying the power of the message that we are in this together, all of us. So how can we support attendance for both students and staff? In order to support student and staff attendance, you must anticipate the difficulty and create the right team to do the work. This team should include more than just the attendance clerk and AP. The principal, teachers, social workers, nurse, and others should be included for the diverse insight they can offer. Your attendance team should frequently review different types of student and staff attendance data to look for trends and determine potential interventions for support. With virtual schooling, alternate schedules, and higher rates of absences all being likely this year, it's important to ensure that you have a strong plan for collecting and monitoring attendance and participation in any modality. This is important to ensure the success of your students. How can they learn if they're not in class, virtually or in person? How can instruction be consistent and effective if teachers are frequently absent from in-person or virtual classrooms? In addition, reported attendance is often used by state and district offices to determine funding and resource allocation. So accurate reporting is essential to the organizational health of your school. Attendance procedures may look different and be more intensive than in previous years. So it's important that all your staff are given clear directions on what part they play in your systems. Now we're going to take a look at a couple examples. You're looking at an example of an attendance team. This team works on providing differentiated and individualized support for both students and staff. You can see this campus has grade level reps, a family and a district rep, as well as adding a counselor, nurse, and social worker, who are all led by the principal. This campus believes it is crucial that the principal is a full participant in the attendance team. By leading the team, the principal can ensure that the recommendations and actions of the team are in alignment with the overall direction of the campus and the decisions made by the leadership team. In addition, the attention of the principal to the work of the attendance team conveys its importance to all staff, students, and families. Here's an example of a when to stay home guidance. Providing guidance on when to stay home is important for keeping your community healthy. Creating a reference sheet like this one that can be used by families, students, and staff, like this one, as a sample from an elementary campus. Use guidelines from your district and health agencies to determine what will be on your reference sheet. It's important that people understand when to stay home to avoid spreading illness, but it's also important that parents and staff understand when it's safe to attend school to avoid further absences. A posted reference sheet will help parents and staff make safe decisions. Now, Terry will take you through the next two areas of the Priority Playbook.
Thank you, Amy. Before we teach, we must re-engage and reignite our school culture to build a place where everyone belongs. We know that a positive school culture is the foundation for the work of a school. Our culture provides an inviting, supportive, encouraging, and inclusive environment for students and staff. As school leaders, we are the captains of our culture. Let your leadership of the culture of your school be informed by the lessons learned from the current events we're living right now. Let's look at some ideas to help you prioritize this work. First, keep connections before content as the filter for your culture leadership work. This can be accomplished by developing a re-entry curriculum and spending your in-person time at the beginning of the school year supporting the learning and practice of building relationships, connecting, healing, and making sure our staff and students feel seen, heard, and a part of your school community. Your staff and students have been through a lot. These structures will provide an opportunity for them to have conversations about what they've been through, how they can learn from these experiences, and make sure their voices are heard. Other ways to proactively reignite school culture include activities focused on building collective commitment statements. These can revitalize clarity of purpose and increase engagement from all stakeholders. Seek out ways to integrate healing-based practices and build shared habits of connection and communication. For example, engage a team of leaders to determine the non-contact greetings for staff and students. It could be a wave, a unique hand signal, air high fives. This can really help your school community move past the awkwardness of returning to physical proximity and build a culture ritual at the same time. How can we keep the work strong throughout the year? Keep providing opportunities for building relationships. You might utilize advisory groups or teams to create frequent student check-ins and community building activities. Also, whatever learning happens at the beginning of the year should be supported, refreshed, and reviewed systematically and routinely to keep it alive and in practice. Collective commitments developed together must be championed and kept alive. Shared fun, shared voice, responsive leadership to adjust the plan along the way are all critical to keep that culture alive and thriving. Set up weekly icebreakers with lighthearted, positive interaction, games, journaling, and optional share out for grade check, goal setting, even wellness check-ins. As the captains of school culture, leaders must focus on strategies to sustain and support the culture while the work that you established at the beginning of the year, keep sustaining it. Let's look at an example of the re-entry curriculum we noted before. Take a moment to skim the topics in this example of a re-entry curriculum. This is a high school planning to support students' re-entry into school for next year. The leadership team talked about what students would need to support their return to campus and a successful start to the school year. They wanted to make sure there were opportunities for genuine connections, as well as building relationships and trust before we ever get to content learning. They developed this curriculum and a schedule for students to stay in self-contained layer groups, the dragons, during the first week of school. Look at the topic list on the left of the screen. The Dragon DNA would focus on cultural diversity and appreciating diversity, those specific lessons. The wellness workshop, that's where they would support students in learning about diet, exercise, stress management, mental health, self-care. In Mindset Study Seminar, that's where they would really engage students to learn about mindsets and how they impact life balance and academic achievement. The Dragon Way will be a way for them to explicitly learn positive behavior structures on the campus, policies and routines. Community through communication is where they could focus on restorative practices, discourse training, conflict resolution. And finally, Believe There Is Good, Be the Good would be their anti-bullying content. After explicitly facilitating learning in this content during the first week, the school plans to sustain the learning and the skills from Dragon Camp throughout the school year by scheduling 40-minute meetings every Friday with these same layer groups to reinforce the learning and strengthen it. Dragon Camp's success and sustaining practices will be monitored by that same leadership team that worked to develop the curriculum. They'll keep it as a recurring agenda item for their frequent meetings. So what exactly is a habit of connection and how do we build them in our school community? If you're joining us from Texas, you probably know what both of these hand signals mean and what university they belong to. For those of you outside of Texas, these belong to the two largest universities in the state. Anywhere you travel around the world, you can count on being recognized by fellow Aggies or Longhorns by the logo on your clothes or cap. Giving a stranger the Gig'em's hand sign or putting your horns up brings you an instant feeling of connection and belonging to each other. While you may not know each other or have much else in common, you know you have shared a meaningful experience in your life and feel the other would understand you on some level. In that moment, you know you are not alone. This is powerful, and this is what habits of connection can do for your learning community. If you already have some habits of connection, consider how you can strengthen them. Teach them at registration, schedule pickup, meet the teacher night, and during your reentry curriculum. Then practice them throughout the year during entrance and dismissal, passing periods, and assemblies. Encourage social media postings with your habits of connection. Using and celebrating others who use them, these habits of connection of your culture will ensure you're building a shared identity, a place to belong for students and staff. So what are the potential habits of connection for your school? The habits of connection are powerful evidence and reinforcements of your culture. Here are a few examples. Hand signals can be used during arrival, dismissal, hallway transitions, greetings both in and outside of the school building, even during virtual meetings. Visuals for connection can be like a t-shirt with a school slogan, the same slogan repeated in communications and social media postings. Opportunity for connection. Call and response rituals, used frequently and with fidelity, can become strong habits of connection. What if every classroom, every meeting, virtual or in person, every assembly and every event invoked the same call and response? Falcons rise above the skies. In that moment, they know they belong. Now that we have a team leading this work, a safe place, our school community attending, healing and connected, we can focus on closing the gap by providing an equitable, high-quality instructional model for all students. Here's what we know. The impact of the COVID-19 crisis is going to be felt most profoundly by the students who were already at risk before this happened. We are not going to be able to catch up on all the content instruction missed. If we know we can't catch up and we know there's significantly more learning loss than typical when returning from summer break, the summer slide may have doubled for some students, then our practices must change. It's more important than ever that our instruction is highly effective and that we're engaging in evidence-based, research-supported practices. As leaders, we'll need to ensure there are systems and structures in place to optimize collaboration and professional growth. Here are some areas to prioritize the work of providing equitable, high-quality instruction for all. We know we'll need to plan for strategic, thoughtful selection of only the most essential standards. We'll need to think about what is ultimately going to benefit our students in the long run instead of just looking at the now. We'll also need to engage in systems of assessment and become better than we've ever been at ensuring the integrity of the assessments we give, engage in strategic pre-assessment, and shared common formative assessments to inform and drive plans for teaching and learning. How do we measure success this year? Yes, we'll be able to assess students as usual with some new approaches, but we also need to include looking at levels of student engagement and looking at student work. To effectively formatively assess, we'll need to go beyond traditional assessment. The urgency for implementing evidence-based instructional practices is greater than before. Our students need and deserve the best practices we've got. It's also time for a shift away from remediation and towards acceleration, focused on mastery of the most essential current grade level standards. We must ask what prior knowledge we can activate, what scaffolded experiences we can design to support their engagement and success with the most critical essential standards. Our students need to be empowered through learning experiences rich in relevance and peer collaboration, with the teacher taking on the role of facilitator, providing guidance, support, and input. This is going to be key to growing their capacity to learn. As well, effective engagement in virtual and blended learning environments is imperative. Yes, we did a great job of jumping online, but can we do better? Can we move beyond transitioning to these new learning modalities and instead transform our teaching so the learning is at higher levels no matter the modality? Can we embrace these new and innovative modalities as an opportunity to personalize pathways for students? I believe we can, because we know better and we must do better. They deserve it. I'll pause to let you read through this process from top to bottom. For strategically adjusting the curriculum, this example is a potential process to guide the work. It starts with studying, prioritizing, and selecting only the most critical standards. This would happen 2 to 3 weeks before content instruction begins. Teachers study the standards for a unit according to your curriculum guide. They'll narrow down the selection of standards based on their study and develop unit and pre-assessments. In advance, they'll give the pre-assessments and use the pre-assessment results so they can have a very clear picture of student needs related to those most essential standards. How can you do this with the first unit? One possibility is to give the pre-assessment during the reentry camp, during that first week of school. These are some guiding questions that would go with that same work process. The curriculum design for your district or campus provides a focused set of standards for a unit. The first stage, the teachers or teacher teams ask which are most important, which essential standards align with readiness for the next grade level, which are aligned with college and career readiness, real world readiness. The result would be a very narrowed, focused set of standards, or even standard. There could be a singular focus standard in some units, depending on the content and grade level. Next, they'll develop an assessment plan, which includes unit assessment and pre-assessments. The most essential standards are then pre-assessed. The results of the pre-assessment provide further opportunity for more focused and strategic planning, adjustment of time, and personalized learning pathways for students. If we're engaging in this work collaboratively with a student-focused learning experience in mind, we will know we're doing better, that we're doing the right work. Now that we've learned more about each category on our Road to Recovery Priority Playbook, I'm going to ask Amy to share the Priority Playbook roadmap to help you make your own plan for your school and your learning community.
Thanks, Terry. Careful planning is the roadmap to doing anything well. To help you and your leadership team plan how to implement the priorities included in this playbook, we have created a downloadable roadmap. The link is being posted in the chats. It's on that same resource page that you've already had the link to. But you can also find this roadmap at any time in the future on our website, along with the priority playbook. This tool is intended to provide guidance and a workspace as your team discusses putting the priorities into action. There is a tab for each section of the playbook. Your team can complete each section or jump to the sections that best fit your needs at any time. We're going to dive into a place to belong. You can see we have provided workspaces with examples to help your team think through the important details for each priority on the playbook. The first part of creating a place to belong is to put connections before content by planning a compassionate and connected re-entry curriculum. The example you see here. I'll give you just a moment to study that example. Now, each tab has multiple workspaces and examples. In a place to belong, the second workspace is for creating collective commitments with your staff. Next is planning how to build habits of connection and communication during the beginning of the year that will help you stay in touch with students, families, and staff throughout the year. Again, you can see in each section, we have provided an example and workspace for your team to follow through. The last workspace in a place to belong is for brainstorming virtual family events to keep them engaged in your community. At the bottom of each tab is a place to log any action items you have determined necessary for that section. The last tab is a roadmap for strategic planning based on the priority playbook. You start by moving over all the action items you have identified on the previous tabs to the blue space that you see in front of you. Then assign a priority starting with one as the most urgent to each item. Next, you can sort the items into the timeline at different points throughout the year and determine the details for this action step. While there are still things you will need to consider now and throughout the school year that might not appear in this tool, we intended it as a way to help your team get started on the road to recovery. As you work through the sections of the playbook, your team will be building habits of strategic planning that will enhance any future work you undertake to serve your students, families, and staff. Again, you can find the roadmap at any time on our website, and it will also be included in the follow-up for today's session. Now I'm handing it back to Matt to wrap up our time together.
Thanks, Amy. I'm going to pass it now to Terry to tell us what questions we've had pop up in the chat and the Q&A that we can address for our participants today.
Sure, Matt. There's a question here about culture that I think I would like to partly answer and then pivot to you, Matt, if you have anything to add. There's some questions about supporting culture and engaging with the culture examples. First, the question about reentry curriculum and how many days might you devote to it? Who's on that team to design that curriculum and who leads it? First of all, any team should be a representative team, as Matt described in the beginning of the playbook. And those representatives would be able to collaborate and determine how much time do we want to determine for that reentry curriculum. So I would say there's not one particular time, 3 days, 5 days, this one school, example school, determined that they would need. It also depends on the needs of your campus and what's available to you, what makes the most sense. So there's a lot of variables there, but as long as you're engaging that representative, diverse team to help with that work, I would say that's it. Matt, do you have anything you would want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just look at when we think about effective tier 1 teaching and the model you described with pre-assessments, your camp should also be based off of how much time your teachers may need to effectively pre-assess to then start to shape the curriculum to meet the needs of your children. So both of those timelines should overlap with each other in order to make sure there's enough time to make both happen. What's next, Terry?
Matt, this question would really be for you. It's about that selection process and how you would encourage teachers to be part of your diverse leadership team, recruitment and encouragement to build that team.
Definitely. So it's all going to be in the sales pitch of the leader. And so think about, if you want people to transform with you, how are you going to pitch it to them to want to be a part of that? Now, I know with our current constraints of social distancing, that might have to be virtually. So we might do a little email video out to our different stakeholder groups, telling them what they could be a part of. You could also build criteria of a job application of what the leadership team will actually do and what they'll be required to do, so that everyone's very clear about what they're signing up for. So just think about your approach and how you're communicating it so that you'll get people that want to participate, so that you have a group that you have to actually start to pick and narrow down because you have so many people wanting to be a part of it.
Thank you, Matt. I would say there are several questions about when school is interrupted, and I'll just put this out for Matt and Amy and myself. When school is interrupted, how do we ensure that we're still maintaining our culture and leading? And I would say twofold, and again, I'll let Matt or Amy build on this. That culture work that we describe is flexible. I believe that work can be done meaningfully, purposefully, and effectively, both in person and virtually. You know, we've all gotten very, very good at virtual communication and meetings. And so I'll pivot to Matt there, because I do believe the other half of that is the communication that he talked about with leading forward. Matt, do you want to talk about communication related to leading culture, even when school's interrupted?
Well, it has to be intentional and planned. So in order to build culture in interruptions or switching between virtual and blended in-person and virtual, you have to be strategic and plan culture building opportunities, because we don't have the option as a principal or a school leader to be able to walk down the hall and high five someone or have a conversation that wasn't planned. That doesn't exist in a virtual school environment. So we have to be strategic and just put that as part of your calendar weekly as a school leader of what culture building are you going to do or have your team do throughout that week over the next week. That could be integrated into your communication plan as well. Amy, do you have anything to add about culture building?
Just that anything that you would be doing in person, any ideas that you might have that you would use for team building or advisory when you were in a building together, start there and then think about what are ways that I can do that same spirit. I can get that same sort of spirit of the activity in a virtual setting. I know our team has experienced some of those over the last few months. And also I've seen lots of great examples with my own children and other schools that we work with. So if you just start from the place of what are the fun team building or culture things we would have done in the past for both your staff and your students, try to carry that same spirit over into things that you can do virtually. But as Matt said, the important thing is to make sure you're planning those things up front, because a lot of times when we go virtually, those things take some time to arrange, more so than they might have done in the past. So that planning time really allows for everybody to have a great experience.
Thanks, Amy. Terry, can we do one more question?
Sure. I think we have time for one more question, and I'm going to kind of synthesize questions that have come up frequently here about, this one's about instruction. So two phases of this question. First, how do we ensure effective Tier 1 instruction in any modality? And then along with that, what if we have students that struggle along the way? How do we support them through levels of support? And I'll refer back to my section and just reiterate Matt's leadership message. You'll need a systematic way to lead that work and ensure Tier 1 effective instruction. And along with that, communication about what the standards are and what you commit to as a campus for effective instructional models. And that would be both virtually or in person. So we know what high impact evidence-based strategies are, and can we move those to a virtual realm? Yes, we can. And it's really just a matter of doing that work, communicating clearly, and having a plan. Matt, do you want to build on that?
I would just add that if we have a framework to build off of, then instruction can be effective in any modality. Where I saw schools accelerate the most in the past few months have been schools that have created a common instructional framework that every classroom is implementing, so that students can navigate that framework easily versus jumping from virtual classroom to virtual classroom with an inconsistent framework. So then they have to think, how is this teacher organizing teaching and learning in this course versus the next one? And so having that consistency from classroom to classroom has provided them the opportunity to reach every student. But then also, when we think about blended learning is a pathway for every student to be successful. So when we design blended pathways for students, not all of it is direct teacher teaching. So that provides opportunities for the teacher to engage with students who are struggling to provide intervention, remediation, or acceleration. Amy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, just building on what you said, if we think back to the sample schedules that we saw earlier in the presentation, you notice that there was time for intervention or check-ins in each of the schedules. So it is important that as you're thinking about any modality that you're in, if we have to switch to virtual instruction again this year, how do you plan purposefully for those times where you want teachers to be able to reteach or intervene with students? So much the way you would plan your master schedule when you're in person, having those same opportunities available to teachers and students are important. But again, in that planning modality, it's really important to think about the importance of Tier 1 instruction. So intervention time, reteach time, however your plan looks, should never replace the Tier 1 instruction time, because Tier 1 has to be available to all students. And I think those examples that we looked at earlier really bore that out. There was a time for both Tier 1 teaching and then also a time for check-in or intervention. And as Matt said, with that intervention setting, we can really utilize a lot of these tools we have learned over the past few months to build those individual pathways in a way that most teachers weren't really familiar with before this. So definitely harness that learning that your team has done over the last few months.
Great, thanks Amy and Terry. So in closing, use the playbook and roadmap to plan for re-entry on the road to recovery and transformation. Share these tools with other campus and district leaders. We are here to support you and can help you do this work. Partner with us for a strategy session to adapt the playbook to your needs and build your campus roadmap wherever you are at in this journey. You can contact Lori Davis about our partnership opportunities. As well, we will have another Road to Recovery webinar on July 21st at 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we will highlight new examples from each playbook category. You will receive resignation information, or registration information, and we've also put that registration link in the chat. So thank you for attending today. We look forward to collaborating with you on this road to recovery as we transform our schools. We must take this opportunity to do something great, and the Priority Playbook allows you to focus on what we must get right. Have a great summer until we see you again. Thank you.